We live in a country far north, with long driving distances, rugged mountains, and long and cold winters. Norway is larger in size than Germany, yet it's home to only 5.5 million people. In other words, this is not the most likely place to succeed with the transportation revolution. Still, this is precisely what has happened. Almost 80% of new cars bought here so far this year are electric. No other country is anywhere near this level. And the development has been fast. 10 years ago, we were at just 3%. This is quite a fast transition when you think about everything that has had to change to make it happen. We needed cars with a new technology, charging stations to charge them, and last but not least, people had to buy them. Why did all this happen in our country? Why did we start buying a lot of electric cars when they didn't in other countries? At least not at the same rate. The simple answer to my question is the economy stupid, to quote James Carville? And by now, some of you are probably thinking, exactly. It's easy for Norway, as a rich oil-producing country, to do this, but it's not as easy for the rest of the world. Well, I will argue differently, but more of that later. First, let's rewind to 2007. That was the first time I drove an electric car. It was the Think City, one of very few car models ever manufactured in Norway. I loved driving without fossil fuels, and for me, the experience pointed towards a different future. And then, in 2011, after years of hearing that electric cars are never going to make it, I tried the electric Nissan Leaf. And it was then that I thought to myself, they're all wrong. This is really going to happen. At that time, there were only a handful of crash-tested, mass-produced electric cars in the world. Think City, Nissan Leaf, and Tesla Roadster among them. At this point, I should probably add to my story that I'm not really that interested in cars. In fact, I only got my first one a couple of years ago. My interest in electric mobility has to do with finding concrete solutions to the climate crisis. Transport accounts for 20% of the CO2 emissions globally, and it's increasing. Yet, we continue to sell new cars that can't run on renewable energy, even though we have an alternative. In 2014, I started as the leader of the Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association. We were 6 employees back then, and we already had about 10,000 members, drivers of electric cars around the country. The organization was founded in 1995 and consisted of a mix of environmentalists and technology nerds. We were convinced that electric cars were an important part of the solution to cut CO2 emissions. And we worked hard to convince our politicians and the general public about the same. We did this from a pretty rundown office, and we didn't have many resources, but we were ambitious, and we knew things would have to change. Okay, let's get back to my initial question. Why did we start buying a lot of electric cars? I said it had to do with the economy. A key word here is taxes. Norway has a long history of taxing the sales of new cars, with a high acquisition tax, in addition to value-added tax of 25%. In the early 1990s, our politicians started to implement economic policies to make electric cars more competitive by removing taxes. 30 years ago, there were hardly any electric cars to buy, apart from the already mentioned Think City. So the result of these policies were not immediate, of course. But as time passed and Mitsubishi, Nissan, Tesla, and others started launching electric models, sales really started to kick off from around 2010. So we have policies in place that follow the polluter pays principle, where we tax the sales of cars according to their emissions. The most polluting cars are taxed heavily, while electric cars haven't been taxed at all. This has resulted in electric cars being competitively priced, even though their production costs are higher. In most other countries, buying an electric car is still a lot more expensive than an equivalent petrol or diesel car. And this is really it. We can't expect from regular consumers to pay a whole lot more for a new type of car just because of environmental reasons. Even super green people think about the cost when they buy something as expensive as a car. And it's not just about the cost either. An electric car is technologically different, which means that people need to learn something new. They might be unsure how to charge, and they might fear the dreaded range anxiety. So the bottom line here is that it's difficult to move from the early adopter stage to the mass market when the price of electric cars is a lot higher. And now I'm back at the Norway's rich argument. Yes, we are a very rich country, but that is not why we have succeeded with electric cars. It's because of our green taxes. By taxing what we don't want, fossil fuel cars, and promoting what we want, which is electric cars. We have also other incentives that have played a role, both nationally and locally. And it's this package of supportive policies that has made people start thinking, maybe an electric car is something I should consider. So politics matters, and politicians make a difference. Several of them from different political parties have been key when it comes to implementing policies. But new policies don't arise out of nowhere, and keeping them in place long enough isn't easy. That is why I have to stress the importance of civil society as well. Together with other environmental organizations, we at the Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association have done all we can to fight for strong policies. Without our support, all the important debates would not have been won. Equally important has been the users of electric cars themselves. They've been talking to their neighbors, family, and friends, and one by one, another person has been convinced to try something new. In our case, the effect of car drivers joining our organization has been vital. With more and more members, we got the resources to hire more people. And today, we are the largest consumer-based electric vehicle association in the world, with over 120,000 paying members, volunteers around the country, and more than 50 employees. Almost 6 years ago, a very important climate goal was decided in our parliament, supported by all political parties. The goal stated a commitment that from 2025, all new car sales must be zero emission, making Norway the first country in the world to reach this impressive milestone. One would think that with this decision, our job was already done. But no. Because every year since, the debate about the tax exemptions and incentives has continued, and suggestions to weaken the policies have been there continuously. So let me tell you, we are constantly working to keep the development on track and to remind everyone that we are not yet done. So far, I've talked about the importance of forward-looking politicians and civil society. But other important stakeholders have had a role to play too. I'm quite impressed by the way car importers and dealers in Norway have done their part. We haven't always agreed on everything, but quite often we've been working well together too. And Norway is not an island, of course, so without European policies directed at car manufacturers and the most forward-thinking car companies, we would not have moved on from the first cars with short range. And without companies building charging stations, we would never have seen electric cars being chosen all around our country. And this is probably the most valuable lesson I can share. Change happens a lot quicker when the push comes from different directions. Not only top-down, but also bottom-up, and maybe also sideways. With more and more electric cars on the road, another almost unnoticeable thing has happened too. People's opinions and knowledge has changed as well. From mostly meeting people wanting to argue why an electric car was not for them and why it would never work, I started meeting car drivers who told me that they had changed their mind completely. They would say, "I was a petrol head, but now I love my electric car." What we have experienced in Norway the last 5 to 10 years is a collective mental shift of opinion, where electric cars suddenly have become the new normal, and where we have managed to shoot down the myths about them one by one. What about the rest of the world? Well, one thing I've learned is that what has happened in our country has indeed inspired others to follow. You wouldn't believe the number of visitors we've had from every corner of the globe, coming to learn from our achievements and mistakes. And what we have achieved isn't that difficult to copy. We Norwegians are not more environmentally friendly than others, and we don't have the best conditions for electric cars. We've just understood that taxing transportation the right way is a powerful tool. In every country where they've done something similar, the uptake of electric cars is higher than in other countries. This is why New Zealand beats Australia. This is why Malta beats Italy, and Costa Rica beats Mexico. The United Nations just stated that policies currently in place globally point to a 2.8-degree temperature rise by the end of the century. We really need to start doing what is needed, and we need to do it fast. One of the things that is needed is to stop the buying and selling of new cars that can't run on renewable energy. Something which indeed we are about to do. As I mentioned earlier, our goal is for 100% of new cars to be electric by 2025, the first country in the world to do so. And we are well on our way, as we are now at almost 80%. Norway can finally reach a climate goal. So my message to the rest of the world is that it's time to stop making excuses. If it can be done in Norway, it can be done anywhere. Thank you.